We are not in such a career, but like biological labs where you really need a lot of resources, a lot of equipment. You don't want to go to like kind of under-resourced place because you'll just not have those things to enable you to do your best work.
New universities have, or new, places have the option now to be better at certain things, while, you have the Yale or the Stanford, but actually I've heard, there was one in UK I haven't heard about beforehand, but they said like, oh, that's the best MBA, that's the best online MBA that you have.
It would be much easier if you go, let's say, to a second rating school or university. You have more chances there.
My name is Jarosław Kareslak.
I'm Kamil Kramic.
I'm a professor of biostatistics at Indiana University in the United States.
I'm a supply chain expert with a focus on global transformation projects.
I primarily deal with more efficient use of data coming from medical experiments.
I'm passionate about leadership, continuous improvements, and culture in the global business landscape.
So just wanted to say that all the opinions in this podcast are our own, and they do not represent the institutions that we're associated with.
Well, apparently there's a storm right now, yes, so hopefully
now there's a storm that's raining quite heavily, and there's some thunderstorms.
Yeah, so the situation in UK...
The rainforest in its all its splendor.
In UK, the situation is stable. Nothing changed. Yeah.
As
Maybe
always.
a little bit.
You always keep calm.
Yes, absolutely. So right, look, we've talked about the cultures and how it affects all of our decisions across geographies and at work or maybe in the different places as well. But there's one important thing, or one of the most important decisions we make in our lives are the things around careers and our careers and how do we make them. And I think it gives a really nice segue from, again, guys, you're people who had to make a lot of career decisions in your life, quite important ones as well, like moving countries or moving places, quite significantly, moving your lives around there. And have you noticed any differences? And I guess you touched on it with a structure bit, but any career opportunities between the States, Portugal, Australia, Poland? Any insights around that?
I can start, and this is going to be specifically to academia. There's a big difference between the promotion system within the academia, so the way you progress in the rankings of your academic positions between US, Australia, and I would say most of the European countries, or at least the South European countries. The progress in Portugal, and talking specifically about Portugal, it's dependent on openings in the academic track. So basically there's a certain number of, let's say, full professors at the faculty, and only one of those positions is open, then you can apply to one of these positions. In Australia, similar to the US, the promotion is based on your track record. So you build your portfolio of your research, of your teaching, and then you present the case to a committee, usually a faculty committee, that will evaluate if you're up to the standards to that level. So it's quite a different system, so there's advantages and disadvantages once again to both systems.
Yeah. So this is what you summarize about Australia and US. It's quite similar. However, also from talking with you and other people, there are also some differences. Yeah, with the we have in US we have so-called tenure track system. It's like usually the first 6 years, like almost like a probationary period at the university. But after those 6 years, we either get permanent position, which is I'm kind of hesitating here with permanent because it's not as permanent as it used to be. But it's unless we do something crazy, we pretty much, in most places, most situations, we keep it. Where in my understanding is in Australia, it's still not exactly
We do have a 5-year probation period,
Okay.
but we don't have the necessarily the idea of tenure. You do have continuing positions, which are not really, they can be terminated, but there's some stability in those positions.
5 year. 5 years.
5
Did you
years
say 5
probation,
years
yes.
or 5
Yeah.
months? That's a
No,
really
5
long time
years.
for a probation period, then, Jarek.
Well,
that sounds really good.
you stay in academia usually for a very long time, so
Yeah. Well, you say 5 years, it's a long time. When we're at this institution that, let's it remain nameless for now, probationary period was really like 11 years. And there was, you were either going up or out after 11 years. So basically, and anybody, after those 11 years, anybody could apply for a position. And if you were better than everybody else, you would get such a position. If you were not, you had to find a job somewhere else.
Oh, here you go. It still sounds 11 years. That's like a whole career change that you can do. I mean, it's definitely different in a business. 3 months is a standard. 3 months for business, so it gets pretty quicker. But then again, I guess maybe that's something that the business world could learn a little bit. How much you can actually prove, or how much you can actually test in 3 months. Literally, the first month is probably finding where the coffee machine is and meeting, the first 5 people in the right way, and then we're talking about, setting up the future together. And are there any? So to give you an example, and I had a one from my personal life the other day. You in the business world, when you make career decisions, it's obviously all of the factors are important for you. You develop yourself, you can grow, you can get more money, you can do lots of there's a lot of factors. But the one thing which is quite common is that you can get much more from like growth or a position that you do if you go to a location which is I guess least desirable, or maybe considered a bit more dangerous for certain elements. Is that a similar bit? Can you get more in academia by going to the least desirable place somewhere in the earth? I don't know, Antarctica, for example. Maybe.
Well, it is quite an interesting question, and I think this differentiates the way of thinking between academia and business, because that would be true, especially in a system where you have to compete, for example, for opening positions, like the one that I was saying in Portugal, that you have to open. It would be much easier if you go, let's say, to a second-rating school or university. You have more chances there. But from my experience and my colleagues, I think everyone aims really to work at the best institutions, because this is where the best research is. This is where the best people are. So you really try to aim for that. I think the profile of people that follow, that pursue an academic career or a business-like career, it's different in that regard, right? We are not as pragmatic, I guess. There's more a bit of a passion, I would say, for the maybe a little bit more romantic in that sense. And I think at least most of the people that I know, and I've talked about these things, I'll say that the choices are driven by opportunities to work with the best ones, to be exposed to the best researchers, people that changes, for example, lab. That's not my area, but because certain university has an amazing lab with excellent conditions. So this is what I guess really attracts academics, and not as much the promotion or even the salaries. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of exceptions in these things, but I would say this is the driving factor.
If I may just add a brief thing to that, so it's also, it's kind of funny to think about it, because again, I guess the goals might be slightly different. So in addition to these best places from the research point of view, it's also usually such places attract the best students, the best kind of like research people who are kind of interested in research but are maybe not professors, so like postdoctoral fellows and so on. Plus, usually their resources in such places are better, and especially in careers that we are not in such a career, but like biological labs where you really need a lot of resources, a lot of equipment. You don't want to go to like kind of under-resourced place because you'll just not have those things to enable you to do your best work.
And that's very true in business to a degree as well. I mean, if you think about why do people want to go to the like the big companies, so the rich companies, let's call it like that. It's also I mean, obviously in the world it might be a bit less romantic, Armando, with the salary bit, but I think there's still an element of that as well, because if you have a training center, or if you have an access to even the money to do or to try different things, it's very attractive to a number of people as well. It's definitely attractive to me. So if I'd have to go to a venture capital business, which would probably pay a lot of money, but really focus only on the profit, and I wouldn't have the space to, grow a little bit as a human being and actually learn new stuff and do and work with different teams, different people, and getting to know to them. I wouldn't probably make that decision as well. So I guess it depends where you look, and it might be quite similar to what you're describing as well. But I love the word romantic. We're gonna call the podcast like that. That's gonna be our title. Romanticism in there. Right. Yeah, that's really interesting. And did you had any, any pivotal moments, guys? I don't know, influenced by the careers that you have, or you say romantic and you choose Australia. I guess Armando, you've chosen Australia because of the options and the.
It has something to do with romanticism as well. But I went back to Portugal after spending some time in the US. Really, enthusiastic and a lot of projects. I had a fantastic working environment. But when I was back in Portugal, this coincided with the world crisis, the financial crisis in 2007, and the last. Portugal was, as you know, quite affected by that. Professionally, as I said, I had a wonderful experience at the university. My group there was quite stable and still quite enthusiastic, but it was more like socially. It was quite a depressing environment. Everyone was upset. It was terrible situations of friends with either friends or the families that were unemployed. People were going through tough times, and fortunately, me and my wife, we had opportunities to go somewhere. And at the time, it said, both of us were a bit upset with the situation there. I said, well, let's try something different. I had I wouldn't call it a passion for Australia. This is the romantic part. I would say a fantasy about Australia, because it was not, it was never in the plan. It was just something in my dreams, and by coincidence, the stars aligned in a certain way. I had a friend that moved here, and she contacted me. She told me about the position here at the University of Sydney, and it was started almost like a joke until I got an interview and things become a little more serious. And we decided, why not? Let's try it. So I still had a connection with the University of Porto at the time. So I took sort of a sabbatical, came here for a while, and then we decided to stay. So it was not as much the professional, although now knowing a bit of reality, I think in terms of the university, it's a wonderful place here at the University of Sydney. This is something quite interesting, and we're talking a little bit about culture before. It's quite interesting that given the situation of research nowadays that is so collaborative and involves so many people and so many resources, a place like Australia that is, I would say that the world is so far away from Australia, right? It's quite isolated, and with a small population, and it maintains a level of research that is really at top. Like there's we find ways of collaborating with people across the world. Usually we can collaborate at very weird times, As for example, the time that we're recording this podcast. But I frequently have meetings, for example, at midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning with colleagues from the US. So make a little bit of sacrifice in that sense. But Australia managed to maintain a high level of competitiveness in terms of universities, both in terms of research and in terms of teaching. And this is quite an interesting detail about the Australian position. And this was a bit of a surprise. I was not expecting. I knew that University of Sydney was an important place, but I did not know that it was so competitive at the international level. So knowing that now, I would also add the career opportunity that was open to me. But I would say the first motivation that led me to come to Australia was more personal, social, than necessarily professional.
Yeah. And this is a really interesting and actually an inspiring thought, Armando. That what you called it a fantasy, a fantasy about Australia, and it's really great how you can have an idea or something in your career which is completely disconnected with, or maybe not completely, but very little connected with the world, and actually, it comes true, or you make it come true in a way that goes. It's actually, this is very romantic, and actually, I like that. I like that idea.
It is very interesting how the randomness of your life ends up meeting. I'm good friends of Jarek, and he knows me quite well, and he knows how disorganized. I like improvisation, let's put it this way. So I don't necessarily plan things in a very detailed way. And very early in my life, with my girlfriend that became my wife now, but very early, I was 14. I told her that I would like to do 3 things in my life. I wanted to become an academic, to do my PhD in the United States, and move to Australia and have a cattle station. So I don't have the cattle station yet. So, but somehow, without any plans, because I never plan, the life brought me here.
Oh, that's
actually
inspirational.
We call it also, what you said, fantasy and so on, like entrepreneurial spirit. And this is, I think, one of the things that we wanted to talk about as well, about this, you mentioned kind of how in Australia you collaborate with a lot of people, and it's not just in Australia, which has a research community, but it's, by definition, it cannot be too large, because Australia is not a super large country, at least when it comes to people. So how do you find actually your collaborators? How do you, in your work, how do you, I know you work with people both here at the University of Sydney, but also in the States, and you are going for a wonderful course. If you want to talk a bit about that.
Sure. So yes, I'm leaving tomorrow morning to Brazil.
Nice.
Where I'll be participating in a workshop. Well, the collaboration comes naturally from all this experience around the world that I had. From Sheffield to Boston to Indiana, Chicago now. So different, and obviously in Europe. So I think each one of us here in Australia has, it's like everywhere, the network of colleagues. People, and this is another cultural difference that exists between the US and Australia. People here in Australia, in general, are much more looking outwards than inwards. So, for example, it's very common to find colleagues, Australians, that never been to Adelaide or Perth, for example, that is, on the other side of the country. But most of the people have traveled through Europe. The amount of people that I meet, for example, in my day-to-day life, that knows places in Portugal that I don't know. We're not talking about visiting, Lisbon or Porto or the main touristic places. That they spend time abroad, and there is this. I think it's in the ethos of the Australian, or the Australian ethos. The concern about isolation, and so there is this from a long time, as far as I know, this almost tradition of traveling, and the thing that you would offer to your kids is travel abroad, like spending 1 month in Europe. I've heard this from all different social classes, coming from all different social classes. So this is a very different aspect of the American and the Australian culture, and this obviously reflects at that professional level, right? Because people do have a lot of connections. There's the preferred collaborations here are mostly US, Canada, UK, and also from Asia, because we have a large Asian population in Australia as well. And then, obviously, depending where you come from, for example, I brought some connection from Portugal and some from Spain, from colleagues, and there's people from all over the place here in academia. So these people will also bring those connections. So this, to answer your question about, searching for this connection, they appear almost spontaneously, or I would say from the typical approach that one has regarding the situation in Australia, right? So, knowing that we are an island far from the rest of the world, so this is sort of in everyone's mind that you do have to make an effort to look outwards and collaborate and seek your opportunities there.
So this is, I would say, very different from both US and Europe. That I'm not just singling these two places out, but these are the two places I know, of the research, like US. But what you said is this one sentence about outward looking versus inward looking. I think US is much more inward looking, and it's almost like people come to US to do research. Not that kind of academics from US need to reach outside. It's like, we build it, they will come.
And you have critical mass, right? I think it's also at the end of the day, it's also a matter of critical mass. The population of US is slightly higher than Australia. We have 25 million people here. Europe also, when it started working as a bloc, also benefits from these numbers. Australia, if it wants to be, with the best ones, has to look outwards. I think that's
probably that's a good, I guess, strategical point that you need to get yourself into when you look at it. When you decide on this, Jarek, as well, should I look inwards or outwards? Do you actually have the capabilities to look inwards only, because you might be quite cold. And do you think, Armando, and Jarek, actually, when you look at the strategy and the entrepreneurship and actually making, well, in your case, what the business is science and I guess research, and you make, you look at it, has the roles of the role of universities changed in that? I mean, you look at, now people do like, if you look on the internet, you'll get people making millions with a laptop, and internet access, or, a 24-year or 27-year-old YouTuber is beating the hell out of Mike Tyson in the ring not that often as well, So it's almost like you start to look at it, and the role of individualism, or how do you create your own plan, to coming back to the Portuguese way, let's call it, started to be much bigger. Do you think the role of the unis or the research elements has changed right now?
No, I'll take this one. So university, it has two main roles in society. The first is training professionals and intellectuals. That's the first role, and there's a lot to be said regarding that. And the second one is the innovation/research. It's not the only institution that does that, but a lot of this initiative falls on universities. And these both dimensions are interestingly changing quite dramatically. And I'm saying interestingly because maybe together with the religious institutions like the Catholic Church, for example, the university is probably the most stable institution across centuries. It didn't change much since the time that it's been created. Now, I would say that with this digital revolution, things are changing at the university a lot in terms of teaching. In terms of research, I think the biggest change has been the level of competition that is out there. So there's a lot of institutions that fight for funds for research. There's quite a few, like the number of researchers increased in the previous decades considerably. So there's a lot of people competing for the same amount of research. Depending on the periods that we're talking, there's more financial resources available, less financial resources available, but it became clearly more competitive. There's been a shift in that regard more towards the STEMs. So the universities. I'll talk. So the STEM, so the areas regarding with associated with engineering, informatics, mathematics, like the hardcore sciences, and the arts or humanities components of the universities sort of unfortunately falling a little bit behind. So the universities, I think, they are focusing a lot on that, and this is also where the hardcore research is as well. In terms of teaching, this is where I think, or I see the biggest change in challenges in terms of the what the universities are going through. Internet is not necessarily something new, but its impact in education, and I guess after the experiment of the pandemic, not the pandemic itself, but what we had to adjust in terms of teaching this remote, at large scale remote teaching. I think most of the universities across US, across Europe, and here in Australia, they moved to online teaching at large scale, and this allowed to experiment with new tools, with new ideas. So it is quite interesting where we might be going with that. I think there's quite a few dangers as well. We lose, like with society moving more to online, we lose this humanity, which in the case of the universities, I don't know if you agree with it, but one of the best experiences I had in university was the contact with peers and people that were, shared similar interests to me, that, they had similar intellectual level, similar interests, similar passions. And this was really in terms of growing up as a person, this was really important. I think the experience that students now are having with university is changing, and I don't know how much more will it change if we move to just an online environment. I have two children that are at university age, and their experience at university have been radically different. They don't have to go to campus for the lectures because they can watch online. And they say, with lots of reasons, it's much more efficient to watch a lecture online, where you can stop, you can push back, you can speed up parts that are not as important and so on. So there's more efficient, but then they lose the contact with colleagues, the discussion, the exchange of ideas, and so on. So there is quite a transformation that is occurring at universities. I think we're just starting that transformation. I'm not sure exactly where we're heading, but very soon we'll have to rethink a little bit the role of the university, especially in the teaching area.
Sure.
But what you said about stability, it's also, so yes, it's stable, but it has been changing. I mean, it's not, we don't teach in the same way that, we taught in 19th century. Yes. It's like we still have, to some extent, this kind of lecture system, and but it's not like we deliver things in kind of the same way. It's much more, I would say, interactive. Now it's changing also this online. We almost lose this interactivity, because if somebody is watching a recorded lecture in especially asynchronous mode, there's no interaction. There cannot be a question asked during like a lecture, or if there are small group meetings, what you were saying about your peers and so on. So we're losing a lot of that.
I guess what I was referring to was that the universities have really changed the training that was happening. And again, I'm talking more about the teaching dimension of the universities. That before universities, it was one-to-one. You had the master and you had the pupil, the apprentice that would follow the master and would learn and inherit everything. The universities start to massify the teaching from one lecture to 30, 40 people, but it was still confined to the classroom. The books changed a bit this role, but still maintained more or less the structure, right? And you had, nowadays, with all the differences and all the innovations that we introduce in the classroom, but it's still the classroom. And you have the professor or the lecturer, and then you have 50, 100, 200 students, but there's a very limited number of students that you can teach. If you move to the digital world, and we're teaching in an asynchronous way and so on, now you can completely massify the teaching. You can reach 30,000 people easily, 40,000 people easily. And there's this been happening with universities. You can find courses online from top American universities, for example, right? These courses are offered to literally tens of thousands of individuals, if not hundreds of thousands of individuals, at the same time, simultaneously. So if we, for example, in terms of competition for the students, what used to define universities was its culture that it created with the presence on campus, right? The professors, obviously the quality of teaching and so on, but then the full experience that university could offer
it's not just
on
lectures.
campus. It's not just the campus, but if you're moving to the digital world and you've removed this component, now you'll have to fight for the students that might prefer, for example, taking a course online at Harvard or at Yale, and not necessarily at University of Sydney, which obviously still offers excellent courses. But the competition now it's a at global scale, and this will obviously push the universities to find their space, because now if they are competing at a global scale without the geographical restrictions, you really have to see where you can make the difference, right? Where Sydney University can make the difference compared to Stanford or compared to any other university, or Cambridge or Oxford. So this will, I think, in the next decade really shake a little bit and make universities really think what's the role of the teaching.
And I think you can even, so I was looking through some courses not that far away around some of the digital transformation, and actually what you have now quite often is you'll have a ranking of universities around certain courses and bits, and then you'll have a ranking for online courses. So it's almost like, new universities have, or new, places have the option now to be better at certain things, while, you have the Yale or the Stanford. But actually, I've heard, there was one in UK I haven't heard about beforehand, but they said like, oh, that's the best MBA. That's the best online MBA that you have. But I do agree. There's a very close or very similar dynamic for the experience you were talking about before of like growing and the interaction with people. And I think this is going to be crucial as well for a business environment as well. How do you get the efficiencies of the internet and make sure that people can meet as often as they can through the online and digital means. But I think we are losing this, the growing factor, like you said. If you have people around the room and if you enable it for, a conversation that is going quite dynamically, and you don't have to raise your hand, virtually and wait for 5 minutes until everyone, there. And then by the time you're there, the conversation has gone to a completely different element as well. I think there is still a need to find either find tools that were going to help us do it, or actually meet every now and then and make sure that our plans actually have this human interaction in it. But, well, I have 40 at the beginning as well already, so maybe I'm I still consider myself very young.
That's our generation speaking, but it's going to be because as a parent and probably share the same experience, the way the kids nowadays interact, and again, my kids are not that young, but the way the kids interact is very different from the way, when I grew up, there was no social media, so you wanted to to meet a friend, you had to physically go there, actually knock at at your friend's door. Even telephones were just a fixed one. There was no mobile phone, and you could not use it because it was not free to use it all the time. So the way the new generations interact with a very, very strong digital presence will also shape all the experiences they'll have in the world, in companies, in the university, and so on. So for me, this human component of the face to face, and again, I'm Portuguese, so even the physical touch is very important, right? Like shaking hands, and this is
absolutely
we need these things. But I don't know how much of this will be needed for the new generations. It's for me, it's a bit odd, and it's odd that when I see kids like online chatting, said, why don't you just go to a cafe or just get in the park or just why? Okay.
Well,
so
one of the things is also, and I use this expression, you can't really have this, in Zoom meetings or something like that. You cannot have random encounters. You cannot have random conversations.
That's a
and
good
sometimes,
point.
it's things that come up, it wasn't planned necessarily. Sometimes we have, we talked earlier about those meetings kind of organized and so on. But sometimes even in something organized, we discuss certain topic, but then something comes up and, this light bulb kind of goes off and there's this idea of, a solution to either a business problem or, maybe a research idea. And you just don't have them otherwise.
Yeah, that's true. Right, if I conclude this conversation, I think, again, we found quite a lot of similarities between the worlds. and we can all agree we need to push for the digital world and the efficiencies, but with a human touch. Yeah, the Portuguese human touch. If you find the topics in the discussion interesting, please do subscribe and push the subscribe button, because that will allow us to make many more interesting subjects into our conversation.
Yeah, we will have guests, we will have, we'll talk about other interesting topics, so let us know. What do you think?
Let us know what you think and push that button, please.